What is going on, everyone? Psych Perspectives, GeoFlux here. And I think this is like something that's just very important to highlight because for years, when I'm discussing the issues with wages and salaries not reflecting the cost of living or taking inflation into consideration, there's always people who are like, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Well, let's talk about it. So, the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, employee rights under the Fair Labor Standards Act. The federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour, beginning July 24th, 2009. Which means it's basically been 17 years since the USA has increased the federal minimum wage. So when people are talking about why they can't afford to live and they can't afford rent and they can't afford gas and they can't afford groceries and utilities and paying off student loans, starting a family, the list goes on and on. Well, this is one of the many, notice I said many, reasons why your hourly wages and salaries are low and stagnant. The federal minimum wage has literally been the same for the past 17 years. So when you're wondering why you're still being paid low, you have to go back to what the federal minimum wage is, because this plays a part in why, okay? So the law requires employers to display this poster where employees can readily see it. Overtime at least 1.5 times the regular rate of pay for all hours worked over 40 hours. This only really stands for people who are hourly employees, because those of us that are considered salary, many of the times we're exempt from overtime. So we don't get time and a half, double time, triple time, if we work over 40 hours a week, if we work a holiday. We don't get any of that as salaried employees. So this is mostly for hourly employees. Child labor. An employee must be at least 16 years old to work in most non-farm jobs and at least 18 to work in non-farm jobs declared hazardous by the Secretary of Labor. Okay. Youths 14 and 15 years old may work outside school hours in various non-manufacturing, non-mining, non-hazardous jobs with certain work hour restrictions. Different rules apply in agricultural employment. I personally started working when I was 16 years old in July of 2009. I got my first job working at a daycare center, part-time. It was $7.40 an hour in the state of Michigan at that time. Tip credit. Employers of tipped employees who meet certain conditions may claim a partial wage credit based on tips received by their employees. Employers must pay tipped employees a cash wage of at least $2.13 per hour if they claim a tip credit against their minimum wage obligation. If an employee's tips combined with the employer's cash wage of at least $2.13 per hour do not equal the minimum hourly wage, the employer must make up the difference. That is something that a lot of people do not know. So if you're a tipped wage employee or worker, you work at a fast food restaurant, you work at a restaurant, and you're paid, you get a lot of your money via tip. Most of them, as of July 24th, 2009, had to pay at least $2.13 an hour. I had a job back in 2011 when I was working at a local bowling alley, and it was like $5.25 an hour because we also received tips. And luckily for me, at that particular time, again, 15 years ago, 2011, I was making good money in the tips. I mean, I would get $200-300 on a Friday night, Saturday night, and then if it was a bowling league, Shout out to the Polish bowling leagues, because at that time, the Polish bowling leagues would tip out of this world. Like, you, not to mention all of the 50-50s that you can enter and win on top of the tips. So at that time, at 18, nearly 19, I was living it up, and I thought I was doing well at that time. Nursing mothers. The FLSA requires employers to provide a reasonable break time for a nursing mother employee who is subject to FLSA's overtime requirements in order for the employee to express breast milk for her nursing child for 1 year after the child's birth. Each time such employee has a need to express breast milk, employers are also required to provide a place other than a bathroom that is shielded from view and free from intrusion from coworkers and the public, which may be used by the employee to express breast milk. I just wanted to read some of that, right? Because, like, a lot of us are not really familiar with the Fair Labor Standards Act or the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission or the Employee Rights under the Family and Medical Leave Act or your rights under the Uniform Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. Okay, I mean, there's just so much that needs to be covered and discussed because it's not. So I'm gonna do some videos discussing these things in detail. Stay tuned. But again, that has been the USA's federal minimum wage for the past 17 years. And you wonder why people are struggling. Also, for a lot of employers, if they pay over $7.25 an hour, they're viewing it as basically they're giving you a leg up, even though the federal minimum wage is extremely low. So it's really not much of a leg up for a lot of us. So you have a lot of employers who already are under the impression that because they're paying 15 an hour, 20 an hour, 25 an hour, 30 an hour, that they're doing you a service and they're going above and beyond. And what more can you ask for? What more could you possibly want? And it's like, it's been $7.25 an hour since 2009, 17 years. It should be at least, at the bare minimum, $25, if not $30 an hour by now at the federal minimum wage in the USA by now in 2026. So this is why this is very troublesome. And then those of us that are already at the $25 to $30 range or the $20 to $25 range an hour, right? Or if you're looking at it from a salary, say you're at the $40,000 to $50,000 mark or the $50,000 to $60,000 a year mark. Those of us that are already here can attest that it is hard. It is a struggle because these are no longer salaries and wages that will put you in middle class status. And they haven't been for the past 6+ years, arguably 10+ years at this point. So, you know, most of us, I've stated this time and time before, but most people who are working, in my opinion, should be paid at least twice what they're making. You should be making at least double what you're making. And that's just to keep up with inflation and the cost of living. We haven't even discussed the type of work you're doing, your years of experience, your education. Do you have degrees, certifications? We're not even talking about any of that. We're just talking about keeping up with the cost of living and taking inflation into consideration. Most of us should be making double what we're being paid or what we're earning. Just being real. Because when you have places that are $1,500 a month for rent, you need to basically be making $4,500 a month to prove that you earn 3 times the rent. And if you're at 50K, $50,000 a year, which is roughly $25 an hour, you're not making 3 times the rent. Okay? Like you're lucky to get $1,500 every 2 weeks. So that's problematic. If you're paying $400 to $700, some of you are paying $700 and up per month to own a vehicle, to drive a car, a truck, an SUV, because today's car payments are what used to be considered rent 10, 15, 20 years ago. And then when you include your car insurance on top of the car payment, it's ridiculous. We haven't even talked about utilities, heating, cooling, gas, electricity, water. We haven't even talked about groceries. So again, when people are complaining about how late stage capitalism is and how it's basically destroying everyone's lives and we can't afford to make ends meet and we're working 2 and 3 jobs, got a full-time, a part-time, a side hustle, you're donating plasma, you know, you're literally living check to check and going without and going into debt and living off of credit cards to try to overcome the cost of living. This is a part of the reason why the U.S. government, the U.S. federal government needs to increase the federal minimum wage. We need our U.S. Congress people to push to increase the federal minimum wage, and then we need our U.S. senators to vote to increase our federal minimum wage. We need it ASAP, because 17 years and you're still talking about $7.25 an hour. Where in the USA can you get an apartment or rent a home, a house, an apartment, a townhouse on $7.25 an hour? You're lucky if you can afford a bedroom, a room. You're lucky if you can rent a room at that level. And arguably you can't, because there's places that want $800 for a bedroom and you're sharing everything else in the house or the building with other people, other roommates. You could have 4 people in a house paying $800 a piece. That's how ridiculous things have gotten. Okay? We're literally talking about $3,200 a month, $3,200 a month, split up between 4 people, and each person has a bedroom, and that's the only private space they have, and they're each paying $800 a month for that private space. And in many situations, the harsh reality is it doesn't include other bills. That's just your rent. So yeah, this is why I keep bringing this up, and I will continue to bring this up, because it's really just outrageous the amount that we are all expected to try to live off of, and how the government tries to justify low and stagnant wages, and then constantly blaming, whether it's millennials, Gen Z, it'll be Gen Alpha next, blaming entire generations of people for why they can't start families or buy homes or get out of debt. Care to explain why we're still accepting this? This is one of the reasons why.